Okay, we are going to go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to the webinar. We have an excellent and very sensitive topic today. It's when to consider memory care. And as always, this webinar is brought to you by a collaboration of sponsors. We thank Care Choices, Hospice and Palliative Services, O'Connor Mortuary, Caring Companions at Home, and of course, Alzheimer's Orange County. And we thank you for joining us today. And we know that our sponsors are providing these webinars as a service to our community on topics that are beneficial for anyone who cares for and works with older adults. So we hope that you find today's presentation informative and useful. Today, our presenter is going to be Dr. Jane Mahakian. Let me tell you a little bit about her, and then she's going to come and be with us. And Dr. Jane Mahakian is a gerontologist and author who has worked and advocated for 30 years in the quote-unquote realm of forgetfulness. She specializes in helping adults and their families with cognitive impairment caused primarily by Alzheimer's disease and other dementias. Prior to founding her company, Aging Matters, in 1998, she directed the UC San Francisco Elder Care Referral Program for more than 10 years. Dr. Jane developed the innovative initiative to provide resources and other information for UCSF faculty, staff, and students dealing with elder care challenges. Dr. Jane also served as a visiting research associate with the San Francisco Institute on Aging. Dr. Jane holds a doctoral degree in clinical psychology from the California School of Professional Psychology in Berkeley. She completed her clinical training at the Veterans Administration Medical Centers, a 2-year pre-doctoral internship at the VAMC in Martinez, California, and a 1-year postdoctoral internship at the VAMC in San Francisco. Dr. Jane is also licensed as a marriage and family therapist, and since 2001, she's been a certified member of the Aging Life Care Association. In 2017, Dr. Jane founded Alzheimer's Care Armenia, Inc. Dr. Jane's recently published book is titled, I Hear You, Talking and Listening to People with Alzheimer's, and you can get that book on Amazon. Her Aging Matters website can be found at www.agingmattersinc.com. So she is so qualified and has such a wealth of expertise and experience. And let's go ahead and bring her on.
Thank you so much, Kim, and thank you so much, Michelle, and thank you everyone from Alzheimer's Orange County for inviting me to be here this mid-morning to present on when to consider memory care. So I'm going to talk a little bit today about Mr. Peterson, who was a dear patient of mine when I had my practice up in San Francisco, and talk a little bit about his transition from home to a memory care community in the city. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about the benefits of living in a memory care community versus staying at home. And finally, I'm going to touch on really understanding when is it time to transition? What are some of those red flags that you need to look for when it's time to transition from home to a community? Next, thank you. So how do you know when it's time, when home is not enough? What do you really look for? Many of you know I'm a care manager and gerontologist, and you know, it's very important for us to come to people's homes because there you really understand really what's going on in the person's home. So when is home not enough? What are some of the things that you want to look at? Poor personal hygiene is, you know, when the person answers the door, are they dressed in appropriate clothing. Is their clothing neat and tidy and clean? Does it appear that their hair has been neatly combed and washed? Are they presenting well, both dress as well as personal hygiene? You also want to look at any possibility of high fall risk. So you want to get an idea of really how much in the previous has there been any kind of falls. Has there been a history of falling? And if so, what has been addressed to it? What has been put in place to address that risk? And also increasing confusion. A person, as you may know, can go from on Wednesday being very, with it and organized, and then by Friday that person's more confused. So these are some signs of when home is not enough. Not able to manage finances, giving away money, mismanaging bills, not paying bills or overpaying bills. These are all red flags. And poor judgment. Somebody who, takes a walk, goes for a walk around their block, but forgets to lock their front door. Is perhaps receiving phone calls from people who, clearly they don't know, but yet are engaged in a conversation with them, which puts them at risk. So again, these are really when home is not enough. Next.
Dr. Jane, I believe we missed the slide right before that.
Yes, thank you.
If you could go back one, Kim. Great.
Thank you very much. So some of the other items to look at, and really which are really red flags of when it's time to transition from home to a community, is looking in the refrigerator. You can definitely see how the person is functioning, how well they're doing on their own with preparing meals by looking in the refrigerator. Is the produce, for example, fresh? Are there enough staples and basic items, proteins, for example? Are there outdated items in the refrigerator? These are all things that you can do when you visit your loved one, for example, is really getting an idea of really how they're preparing meals by looking in the refrigerator. I will never forget, perhaps it was maybe a year and a half or 2 years ago, looking inside a new patient's refrigerator, and there was very little in the refrigerator. There was only a few Ensure drinks and some bottled water, and that was pretty much it. And then you also want to check out the shower. Why are we going to check out the shower? You want to look at the soap. If there's a bar of soap, you want to see if the bar of soap has some cracks in it. So really your job is to be a detective. If the person is showering every day or every other day or even every 3 days, the soap is going to be not going to be having some cracks and dried out. You want to make sure that that person has access to a shower or a bathtub. Many times when I visit people's homes, there are items in the shower. So that tells me that they're not showering, even though they say that they are. Has the person lost some weight? That's another red flag. The person is not eating enough healthy meals. So you want to look at that and see, has there been a change since the last time you saw him or her? And then, of course, physical safety is at risk. And at home, of course, especially now during the pandemic, there's been very little social engagement, social activities for the person to engage in, which creates a lot of loneliness and isolation, which, of course, as we all know, increases their, unfortunate cognitive impairment. It actually, the type of engaging cognitive type classes that are in our community here in Orange County really help people, and they help slow down the progression of the disease. So being at home, isolation, more depression, their physical safety is at risk. It may be that perhaps there's a lot of clutter in the home, so much clutter that that person is a fall risk, and those items present to be risky. So these are all signs that it's kind of time to take a look and maybe start having that conversation with that person. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about, as I said earlier, Mr. Joseph Peterson. Of course, that's not his real name. This gentleman was 86 years young when I met up with him, and a retired merchant marine. He had moderate Alzheimer's disease and lived alone in a very large Victorian in the heart of San Francisco when we met up. Mr. Peterson had very few, really very few friends, with the exception of his CPA, who had telephoned me and asked if I would do an assessment on his client's well-being, because he was concerned about Mr. Peterson. Mr. Peterson was visiting his office almost every day over the last couple of weeks and presenting the same paperwork to his office, so he became concerned. When I knocked on the door, there was no answer to Mr. Peterson, and I knocked and didn't receive an answer to the door. And some of you know this story because I've shared this story in some of the seminars I've given several years ago. So I decided to call him, and sure enough, he answered the phone and he said, "Sure, come on in, Doc. I'm happy to have you." And when he opened the door, it was pretty clear this person, Mr. Peterson, was pretty much a hoarder, and there were pathways to his kitchen, much taller than myself, of course, and lots of paper, lots of things stored, just a lot of clutter. Through the pathway, I followed him into the kitchen where we sat down, and he looked at me and he told me that he was very happy that I was there to meet with him, because he had a roommate, and his roommate really needed a place to live, that he really wanted his roommate to move out. And I thought, well, I wasn't sure about a roommate. The CPA didn't share that Mr. Peterson had a roommate, but I believed him that there was a roommate. And I said, "Well, please, can you show me your roommate?" And he goes, "Sure." So I followed Mr. Peterson down this very long hallway in a very dark Victorian, as you can imagine. And he started opening doors and said, well, his roommate was not there in this door. And we went to another door and opened that door, and no, the roommate wasn't there. Well, we went to door number 4, and there he thought he saw the roommate. And he looked in the mirror and he said, "There," as he pointed to the mirror, "is my roommate. I would like you to please find a place for my roommate to live." Well, it was pretty clear that Mr. Peterson, a lovely gentleman, had pretty moderate advanced Alzheimer's type dementia, and he was having delusions and some hallucinations, and he was not safe to live in the home. The home really was not safe for anybody to live in the home. So very quickly, I had to make some arrangements to make sure that he was safe and had proper nutrition, of course, and proper care. I just want to add that when I looked inside Mr. Peterson's refrigerator, he had about 45 to 50 boxes of shortbread cookies in his refrigerator. As it turns out, one of the things that's very important, whether it's Mr. Peterson, of course, or of course all people, is that we really need to understand him. We really need to understand his previous life and what was important to him. What really was this? What did he value? And one of the things that Mr. Peterson valued was being on board ship. He was a merchant marine. He had been married previously, but unfortunately his wife had passed away about 20 years previously, so when he was in his 60s. So what was important to him? What did he like to do? Well, he'd like to look at picture books with ships. That was a lot of the time how he spent most of his time in his home. So how we're going to transition to Mr. Peterson to a memory care community is basically what I call in my book, or the book I co-authored with Allison Kuhn, is something called the kind of lie. And the kind of lie is therapeutic fibbing, which is perfectly appropriate for this person's level of cognitive impairment. And Mr. Peterson was told that he was going to be going on board ship, and instead he went to one of the leading memory care communities at that time in San Francisco. And when he got there, he just was thrilled because he believed he was on board ship. And sometimes I was the captain, and sometimes I was demoted and not the captain when I went to visit him. He fell in love with another resident there who he believed was his wife, and he lived there with her in this memory care community for about 4.5 years. He had a very good life there, and he was very well cared for. He believed the entire time that he was on board the ship, and he was happy to be there. So really kind of talking about really how best to transition him was really honoring who he was as a person and seeing how that could be possible to make the transition as least stressful as possible. Next slide, please. So what are those advantages of a memory care community versus staying at home? Basically, as we all know, and for those of you who have a loved one that is living at home, especially during this pandemic, it has been a very difficult journey for the person living alone at home. The memory care community, definitely there are definite benefits. The benefits really are the engagement, the stimulation. People with a dementia need to feel that they're succeeding, and they need to feel that there's a purpose to their day. The right memory care community will provide that with a structured program every day, with a schedule, with consistency, and with the sense that they're up to something every day. So when they wake up, they know what they're doing during the day. They take a look at the schedule. And it's very important that the memory care community also, of course, focus on the positives. And what can the person do, not really what they can't do. And providing those activities, whether they're group or individual activities, that really reinforce their sense of being effective and really focus on maximizing their sense of independence in the community. And they really, as we all know, in the memory care communities here in Orange County, really those that create a tailored daily routine, really it helps boost their confidence and makes them feel like they're accomplishing things. Again, the advantages of a memory care community, and thank you again, Kim, is really a sense of safety. So there's a sense of predictability that a person with a cognitive impairment needs, that sense of predictability, their sense of safety. They feel accepted in that community. They also have a sense of socialization, and sometimes people want to do individual type activities. That's perfectly fine, but there's also opportunities for being more social. And being more social is really what you want to do when a person has a memory impairment. You really want to help them be more social and focus on those type of skills. And as I said a little earlier, that sense of meaning and purpose. They need to feel that they're contributing. I mean, there are communities in our South County that will actually help develop a job for that person and give that person a job where they feel that they're on staff there. They may even have a name tag, which is really awesome. And then too, the routines really help lessen anxiety and challenging behaviors. At home, it's hard to build in a routine. It's hard to build in, you do not have an activity director in your home. It's hard to build in those type of structure and really sense of things that they're up to in life when you're living at home. Next slide, please. So I added this slide because I just feel that Dr. Wally Bortz you know, in his book, which is an amazing book, and Dare to Be Old, it just, you know, strikes me, it's so important that, you know, you do not disengage because you are old because you disengage. And this is the same whether you have a memory impairment or not. You must be busy, you must have engaging activities, and you must find purpose. And as many of us, you know, retire, it's the same thing. You need to redefine that purpose. When a person has a cognitive impairment, they need a purpose. They need to be they need to be up to something. Next slide. So what are those quality of care factors in a community that are important to look for? You know, it's not on this list here, but I'm thinking what's very important, and one of the things I do when I will go to the communities here in Orange County is to look at natural light. I look at the lighting, I look at the space, I look at the design. And natural light and lighting is very, very important. It's very important. And so I encourage you all, when you do tour or when you do have a client or a patient that is considering a memory care community, take a look at the lighting. Take a look also and look around and observe. You know, do their residents, do the people look happy? Do they look engaged? Is there an energy to that community? And of course, is the staff smiling? Do they look happy? Or are you picking up other types of things such as, you know, is there any kind of stress? Do you sense any stress with the staff? So these are the kind of things that I like to look for. As a care manager, when I visit communities, I just usually pop in. I like to pop in, whether I have a patient there or not, just to kind of get a sense of what's going on, right? Do they have a philosophy on their caregiving and their programs? And is that philosophy one that is incorporating their training program? So do they have a specialized training program for their staff? These are questions you can ask. You can also ask about the attrition rate. You know, how long has their care companion or care staff been on staff there? What's their turnover like? And take a look at their monthly and daily activity schedule. Every community has a different schedule. You can even meet with the activity director or assistant activity director and get a sense from him or her, what it's like. You can also observe activities. I've even participated in activities, which is really fun for me. So I really get a sense of really what it's like. And then you can also ask to see if you can have join them for lunch or dinner and really get a sense of their food. Do they make specialized, prepare meals for somebody who really, for example, in our community locally, there's a dear patient of mine who loves to have hamburgers for lunch and dinner. And for lunch and dinner, she has a hamburger, of course, with fruit and vegetables with it, but that's what she loves, and this community accommodates that. And look at the quality of their outdoor space. Outdoor space is very important. Is there a lot of walking space or space to be outside? And what does that outside space look like? And of course, LVNs or RNs on duty, or are they on call? And are they on duty during the day, or are they on duty 24 hours a day? These are some things that you can kind of get a sense and look for. Next slide. So what happens when a person, is living in the correct memory care community? What really happens to them is they just become more alive. They become more engaged. There's less anxiety. There's less withdrawal. Sometimes when I will see a patient, a new patient living in their home, that person may not want to get out of bed and they're starting to withdraw. Well, why is that happening? Well, there's not a lot of things to look forward to for that person to get out of bed. They may be more depressed. So the more they stay in bed, the more depression increases. The more their cognitive impairment, unfortunately increases. So when people live in an engaging, fun environment, there's really improvements physically for them. They improve their mood. They may have less anxiety. They may have less behavioral problems. They may be less tearful. So I've seen some amazing things happen when, especially many families, I work with, it's very difficult to make that decision of when is it time to move, but if they should move, right? And many times it's easier for a life care manager to present this idea to the person about moving or transitioning or looking at a community life versus staying at home, because it's not the family, so it makes it easier for that transition. But when they do make the transition, sometimes families will say, well, my mom would never attend an activity. She likes to be by herself. But surprisingly, when presented and offered to her or him, that person does engage. They are having fun in that right community where they will engage that person and really have that person just really invite them and give them a sense that they belong there, almost like a sense that they're part of a larger family. That's really the feeling you want to be able to have for your loved one. That's really great. So I just want to add, in the special needs of the person with memory loss, one of the biggest issues, to keep in mind in caring for that person with dementia is the caregivers. The caregivers in your loved one's community, they don't know your loved one. They don't know who your loved one was before the disease. They don't know what this person was like. So painting a picture, just like I did of Mr. Peterson's life, painting a picture of this person's life will be really instrumental for that person and those people caring for him or her. So that engagement and that need to feel that they're succeeding in the world around them, those kind of things I can also call, maybe even say it's a little bit of magic that happens, right? In that right community where there's stimulation, where that person is not withdrawing inward, where they feel that an inner sense of safety is really because they feel stimulated by the environment. So these are the special needs of a person with memory loss. They all need, and we all need, a sense of safety, right? Whether we have an impairment or not, but a person with a cognitive impairment needs a sense and a feeling of safety. They need a feeling that they're contributing in some way. They need to feel that they're engaging in activities and that are meaningful activities. And they require predictability, and they require a consistent routine. And they require socialization, even though they may have, been more solitary, spending time by themselves. They still need the social choices to make. And you'll see too is, many times that their cognitive, status will change. It will actually improve as they make that transition and settle into that new community and their new routine. So again, the feeling of contributing, of meaningfulness is very important. Next slide. So as this states, when a loved one has symptoms, these simple objects, actions, and environments, they're really overlooked, now require our attention, right? So you really want to be very well aware of really honing in on really how to improve that person's life. Really, you want to really improve their well-being and improve the quality of their life. So these are some magic words that are gifts, and I'm sure that many of you who are care managers, administrators of assisted living, independent living, and memory care communities, you're already doing these things. And I think it's also too that family members are also learning how to say these things and do these things. So these are things that you can say that really are words that are gifts for that person, whether they're living at home or whether they're living in a community, such as, I'll be here all day if you need anything. Now, of course, you may not be here all day, but they don't need to know that. But it makes them feel safe and it makes them feel secure that you will be. And then reassuring that person, between the two of us, we will be okay. And then saying things, well, I do silly things like that too. You know, if somebody who's living at home, you know, can't find their cell phone, I may say, you know, I do that too. I may lose my cell phone too. Let me help you find it. Or don't worry, I will take care of it. And so you're pretty important around here. And making them feel that is very important. Next. So as many of you know, the concept of time and dementia is changes for that person with an impairment. So their past may be confused with the present. Time is absolutely, there's no continuity and it's not sequential. And their memory may be there one moment and gone the next. And the person with dementia knows what they know at any given moment. So in the case of Mr. Peterson, you know, the staff reminded him of his treasures, his life treasures. The staff gave him back his history and his accomplishments. And the staff's job was to figure out, well, what age was he currently living in? Where was he in time? Where was Mr. Peterson in time when he was living on board ship, you know, at the memory care community? Where was he? Well, he was in his late 20s is what we had figured from what he was presenting to us and sharing. And so that was important information. And what was significant for him in his life at that time, in his 20s and early 30s? So that's very important. We need to understand him and understand that time really is not how it is for you and I. It's conceived very differently. There is a story, which is true, of course, of Mr. Peterson. And one day I received a call from the memory care administrator that Mr. Peterson had slipped out of their community. And, you know, of course, this was San Francisco, and this community was right in the heart of the city. And he had slipped out. He had slipped out with people who were visitors and had joined them and then went on his own way. So, you know, obviously, the police, you know, everybody was contacted to look for this gentleman and where would he be? Would he go? And again, going back in time, he was in his 20s and 30s, and we all remembered, of course, he was married at that time. Now, where would he go? Maybe he would go back home. So myself, and at that time I had 2 interns working with me, and we raced to his home, and nope, sure enough, he wasn't there. Nor was he at the CPA's office. And the bus lines were contacted, the police were contacted, and hours went by, 4 or 5 hours, still no Mr. Peterson. And the staff went out looking, and then about probably around 4 o'clock, and he had slipped out in the morning, I received a call from one of the local hospitals, and we had been calling the hospitals, but they did not have him. But he had arrived at a hospital, and they had telephoned me, and the nurse stated, you know, I found your name and number, Dr. Jane, and it was in the inside of his belt. Well, all of his belts had my name and phone number on it, just in case, you never know. And sure enough, when they took off his belt, they found my number, and I raced down to the hospital. And when I arrived, he said, "Where have you been? I've been looking for you. What took you so long?" And I said, "Well, Mr. Peterson, you know, where are you? Why did you come here to the hospital?" And he said, "I was looking for my wife. So again, you know, he's back in time. He believed his wife was still with him. And again, that was not real. So thank goodness he was safe. We brought him back to the community, and everybody was very happy to see him, of course, that he was safe. But, you know, knowing where he was in time really helped us figure out, you know, really where could we look for Mr. Peterson. Next slide. So in closing, you know, it definitely, you know, takes a team. It takes a village to care for someone, to care for our loved ones, to care for our clients, to care for our patients. And, you know, we all have 3 basic needs, and the needs are really to be loved, to be able to express emotion, and to feel productive and useful. These things do not go away as we age or when memory or other impairments occur. And I'll close with a story, and this story is about Sarah. And Sarah was a physical education teacher. She was around 68 years old, and that, of course, is not her real name. But she was living in a community, she had Alzheimer's disease, moderate stage. She was living in a community that really did not understand her or her behaviors. And during her transition from home to the memory care community, after about a month or so, she began to develop, unfortunately, a lot of tearfulness, a lot of sadness. Her medications were changed, but she continued to be very sad and very despondent about living in this particular memory care community that she was at. Staff could not engage her in activities. She stayed in her room and stayed in bed. And then she began to develop some behavioral problems where she began to pound on the windows. And the staff at that time felt that they could not manage her and that she became aggressive. I was contacted by her husband when she was hospitalized, and she was hospitalized in a psychiatric facility. This was somebody who was very physically fit, but and was walking quite a lot before her move to the memory care community. But this memory care community really had no real idea of really how to really empower her and make her feel good about herself, as well as making her feel that she had a purpose. So upon discharge, I was able to secure an early discharge from the psychiatric hospital. She was transitioned to a new memory care community. And in that community, and she arrived in a wheelchair. She was no longer able to walk for a variety of reasons. One of them was the changes of medication, as well as managing. Unfortunately, they felt they had to have her use a wheelchair to manage her behaviors. When she reached the new memory care community, within a week and a half, she was walking. She had physical therapy. Her medications were changed, and she was given a job. And she was given a sense of purpose that during their exercise class, she was told that she could assist their activity director. So she would help the activity director with the exercises. And by doing that, it made her feel more engaged, it made her feel more purposeful, and it reduced and almost completely eliminated the behaviors. She was tearful still at times because it was still another transition, but that quickly, actually those symptoms did go away, and she began to feel a sense of purpose there. So she felt loved, she felt accepted, and she felt that she had a purpose to her life, which is very important for all of us to have. So I want to thank you very much for it's an honor for me to present today, and thank you to Alzheimer's Orange County for inviting me this mid-morning
it is time now for questions for Dr. Mahakian. And so if you haven't already, go ahead and type your questions into the question box on your control panel. And while you're doing that, I want to take the opportunity to thank our sponsors once again, O'Connor Mortuary, Care Choices, Hospice and Palliative Services, Caring Companions at Home, and Alzheimer's Orange County. And you can also see on this slide that Dr. Jane has her contact information here. If you want to get in touch with her or learn more about what she does, there's her website as well as her email. So let me just see if I can get into the question box. And
if you can't, Kim, I'm happy to read the questions for you. If you're
I
not
think
able.
I can.
Okay, great.
Okay. Let me just take a look here. All right. So give me just a second here.
Yeah, they're coming in fast and furiously.
Okay.
I believe the first question we got was from Linda, so if you see that one on there.
Okay, I'm looking at all these technical questions. How do you determine when to consider a 6-bed residential care home instead of a larger memory care community? That's a great question.
That's a very good question. Well, number one, of course, is the person's ability, the financial ability to, their budget is going to be driving, of course, the decision, correct? As well as, sometimes people do much better in smaller communities. People who have some challenging behaviors may do very well in a small community because they can provide more one-on-one attention. It also depends upon where that person is in the progression of their disease. But again, number one is, of course, the budget is, looking at the budget is one of the important factors. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, thank you. I believe our helpline has a good handout on choosing a care community that sort of delineates some of the differences between a smaller place and a larger place. If I'm not mistaken, you can contact our helpline as well. And along the same lines of budget, we have a question about how much does the memory care community cost, and does Medi-Cal pay for memory care unit?
Well, depending upon where you are in Orange County, the prices do range for memory care community, shared rooms versus private rooms. There are board and care homes now, which is really terrific, where they do specialize in working with people that have a cognitive impairment. So again, I think, the prices are going to vary. There are homes that do accept Medi-Cal, and there is a list that you can obtain. I do have that list. If anybody would like to email me, I can email the list to you. There are waiting lists, of course, but there are board and care homes that do accept that.
The waiver?
Correct.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. What behavioral symptoms would be seen in advanced dementia?
That's another good question. Many times, you may, it doesn't happen to everybody, and the disease, everybody's brain is different. So it affects, somebody may not have any behavioral problems, and somebody unfortunately has quite a few. You may see, tearfulness, crying. You may see, striking out, raising their voice. agitation, aggression, an inability to redirect that person. These are some of the challenging behaviors that you may see.
Absolutely. And you're right. It's varies so widely from individual to individual. It's kind of difficult to make a blanket statement or have a blanket answer for that, right? Yeah.
Correct.
My mom is starting to forget things. She's 85. Should I be overly concerned?
Yes and no. Yes and no, right? It may be a good idea to have her be seen by a neurologist for a neurological workup. I would think so. It could be a lot of different factors, but many of us at 80, 85 start to have some forgetfulness. It could very well be just more age-related forgetfulness. If there is the sense of safety as a concern, there's things that she is forgetting, such as leaving the stove on, then you have to look at the safety factors. Is that person living alone, or are they living in a assisted living community? You have to look at the environment. Are they living with a spouse? Are they living with a daughter or a son? So again, it just depends. Everybody is different. And answering that question, Kim, it's hard because it's perfectly okay to have a little bit of forgetfulness as we get older, but not when there's safety issues come up.
Absolutely. Yeah, again, some of these questions, we need more information in order to answer them adequately. So I'm going to make the suggestion to call our helpline just because we would have more time to get more information, as Dr. Jane is suggesting, to find out whether or not the person is living alone and sort of get a little bit more information about the individual's situation. So here's a question. When we tour memory care facilities, there seems to be different levels of care, and I'm not comfortable when the levels are mixed when moving mom. Any suggestions about that issue?
Well, you can feel free to email me or call me also. It really depends upon the community and what their day looks like in terms of activities. It depends on the environment. It depends upon the space. So I think you have to gather a little more facts. That's what I would recommend on gathering more facts about what goes on there during the day. And how do those people interact together? So, there are many communities where my patients are at, and somebody with mild cognitive impairment is there in attending activities with somebody who has a late stage dementia. So again, I think it's case by case or family by family, right? Person by person.
Absolutely. What is best for wanderers? Locked facilities, or is there an alternative?
Well, Kim, I really do not prefer the name or the word wanderers, right? I'd like to think that, it's really more about exploring. If we really understand the disease, it's really they're exploring. So what is the best? It depends upon that person, what's best for that person. Sometimes it's best to have that person at home with a one-on-one person. With a person that likes to walk 3 or 4 miles a day, are they going to be able to do that in a memory care community? Probably not, right? Unless there's a walking club, but they're not going to walk 3 or 4 miles a day. So I think it's, again, you have to consider who that person is and make those decisions that are the best to increase their quality of life and maintain their quality of life.
are memory care facilities open to individuals just dropping in to observe the activities that you were talking about? So can you just drop in to visit?
Well, I'm sure that many of my colleagues and friends who are administrators would say, Jane, please have them call. That's funny. I may drop in, but especially now during this pandemic, I think it's very important to call
Oh,
ahead.
yeah.
I really do. It's very
Absolutely.
important. And as you all know, you must show your vaccine card too. So, and have your temperature taken and sign in. So I would definitely call ahead. I would not just drop in. I think it's better for you to call ahead and make that appointment to tour, or make that appointment to see if you can have maybe a lunch, or observe, for a few minutes their lunchtime or dinner time. That's what I would do.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see what else we have here. What about the person who has dementia and still lives with their aging spouse? Is it necessary to separate them if the stress of caregiving is too much for the aging spouse who is 92?
It just depends, right? I mean, I try my very best to keep people together. If it's, but it depends upon the circumstances, right? Taking a full history and getting an understanding of their relationship is very important from my interview with the children or with the responsible party. Almost all times I try to keep people together because that's very important. I mean, some people, people have been, it's a lifetime they've spent with that person, and to not be with that person is a significant loss. But again, it's person by person, family by family, that decision. That's not an easy decision to make, and there's many factors that we have to consider.
Okay. If a person with dementia is living at home with a spouse who can take care of basic needs and monetary issues, when do you need to transition to memory care? You're getting a lot of tough questions, Dr. Jane.
Well, I am known for, here in Orange County, Kim, for working with very challenging people, but I didn't, it's okay to have challenging questions. So again, I don't know if that's the right thing to do. Maybe staying at home and adding some support at home for that spouse is the right thing to do. Moving to a memory care community and leaving the spouse at home, I don't know if I would look at other options first and see if having some kind of supportive in-home care or home health care could be a way to add support for that couple. So that's what I would do. It's not all about moving to community living is not just the only option. Living at home sometimes is the better option.
With community-based services to support you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I want to pause just for a moment because it is 12:30, and I hope you'll all stay online because we do have more interesting questions for Dr. Jane. But I just want to take a moment to thank our sponsors again, and also to tell you about next month's webinar. It is scheduled for Tuesday, October 12th at 11:30, and it will be, our presenter is our own Patty Mouton from Alzheimer's Orange County, and she will be talking about delivering person-centered care at end of life. So that will be an incredible webinar. Again, that's person-centered care at the end of life, presented by Patty Mouton on October 12th. So if people have to leave now, we understand, of course, but if you want to hang in there for another, we'll be online for another 5 or 10 minutes here. This is a great question. How much does language matter for non-English speakers in an English-speaking memory care facility? This is a great question. So how much does that language matter in an Alzheimer memory care facility when you've got non-English speaking patients and caregivers?
Well, I recently had a situation like that. Absolutely, it's paramount. So if your loved one or client is not English speaking, you certainly do not want to have them in a community or a board and care home where they're not understood. You know, you have to do your research, you have to take the time, you have to be very thorough in the choices that you're making, and make sure that because you don't want to move that person again. It will be one move. You know, you don't want to, and it's very traumatic for the person to move more than once. So right. I would not choose a community where the person is not understood.
Okay, thank you, Jane. I've called a friend in a 6-bed RCFE. She really likes to watch TV news and wants to keep up with politics, etc. They do not put 60 Minutes on or other news. She can speak to me approximately. Oh, no, she can speak to me appropriately, even though she had a stroke. Caregiver seems clueless. I live 3-hour drive away, and family is not close. She is not very assertive, and she has some dementia. So did you get all that? So in other words, she's got a friend in a boarding care that is not being allowed to participate in the activities like news and politics that she wants to participate in. And her friend is upset, and she's 3 hours away. So
well, this kind of thing does happen. So what I would do is I would do a FaceTime with the caregivers. And I would ask the caregivers, I would, on a FaceTime, show the caregivers where, let's say the 60 Minutes, which channel is that? I would also have it posted, so she could mail a little note or have the caregiver write a note to the other caregivers there that this is important to her on the days and times that this kind of news channel, the 60 Minutes, for example, is important. So I would do FaceTime. I would do Zoom, but probably FaceTime is easier, or Messenger. And then that way, that person will have, you know, that enjoyment of that news.
Yeah, or maybe even buy her a small TV to have in her room. I don't know. I mean, maybe the caregivers don't want to have that on the television for the other residents. I don't know, but yeah.
That could be too. I mean, you could also purchase, or she could have her own television too in her room. Yeah. So that's an idea too. Or just being very clear of the schedule of, you know, that she really would like that for an hour this day, you know, that needs to be honored because that's something important to her.
Absolutely. Someone is asking for the list of boarding cares that accept Medi-Cal. So can they reach out to your email?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure. People can email me and I'll send that off to them.
Okay. All right. Well, just a couple, maybe one more question. How do we assure our loved one is not medicated for the staff's convenience in a facility?
I think that was an article that came out several days ago, correct? In a newspaper, there was a newspaper article about that. So how can you make sure? So during the care plan meeting, you want, or during your visit, you want to obtain a list of their current medications. You also want to ask them, and look at their log of medications being administered to that person. That way you can be rest assured of what medications are being given to them. Absolutely. That's a very good question.
Yeah.
I would also have the physician do a medication reevaluation. you can call it kind of, you know, we used to, when we were bringing people or patients into doctors' offices, is doing a, you know, bringing a brown bag of medications, putting all the medications in a brown bag and going to the doctor and showing the doctor, this is what this person's on. Because many times, you know, if the person has 4 or 5 doctors, you don't really know. But you have a list of medications, and then the doctor or the neurologist can make a medication reevaluation. I do that every 6 months for all of my patients, whether they're living at home or whether they're living in a community. It's very important for medications to be reevaluated.
Okay. All right, let's take one more question. How do you talk to a loved one about the need to move to a care community?
Well, that is a very good question to end, correct?
Yeah.
It depends.
That's a
You
tough
may
one.
not have, it is, well, you may not, it is tough. You may not have that conversation. It just depends upon where that person is in the progression of their disease. You know, you don't, you know, you have to be comfortable with using the kind of lie that I talk about, you know, in the book. You know, but again, it depends. If the person has mild cognitive impairment, you're not going to be able to use the kind of lie. You need to sit down and have those difficult conversations. What I like to do is either myself or the physician will have the conversation with that person that right now, you know, and putting it to them as right now, not forever, but for right now, you know, we'd like you to try out this community, whether it's this community or that community, and see how it goes. So it's all in how it's presented to the person. They do not need to know and should not be told, well, you know, you have memory loss, mom, or you have Alzheimer's disease and you need to move. That's the last thing that you want to say. Of course, you're not going to say that. But you want to have those conversations, but many, you know, the kids need to be the kids, right? The spouse needs to be the spouse. You should not be, the children should not be the ones driving this. It's the care managers, people like myself or the physician that helps with this type of transition. So you're not the bad guy, and it's presented in a very gentle, respectful way. But good question.
Absolutely. Okay, unfortunately, we have a lot of questions that we do not have time to answer. And so again, I'm going to suggest that there's a couple of options. You can reach out to Dr. Jane on her email, and then also Michelle is sending out the number for our helpline. It's 844-373-4400, and that's being put in the chat right now for all of you as well. And then there's one quick announcement that one of our additional experts wanted me to make, and that is that the assisted living waiver program for boarding care is at the moment closed, and they are not accepting anyone on their waiting list. So you should be aware of that as well. So, yeah, and Dr. Jane, thank you so much for your excellent presentation. And, you know, you can see from all of the questions that people have been wanting to hear more on this topic. And so it's very timely and very informative. So thanks again so much. As we end the presentation today, please watch for the survey that will open up immediately as soon as I close the webinar. And again, please join us next month on October 12th for Patty Mouton talking about person-centered care at the end of life. And don't forget, you can also always visit our website at www.alzoc.org to learn more about our many education programs and webinars, and to view recordings of our past webinars. And Dr. Mahakian's webinar will be posted in time along with those other recordings as well. So thank you all and have a great day. And thanks again to Dr. Mahakian and our sponsors. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you.